no light of experience to guide my feet. And John Adams also said that experience is the oracle of truth. So what we would like to do here today is look at the history of California, and at least for the last 50 years, and going back to about 1926 and as far back as 1850 in some cases, to see where we can go next and what's happening to us now. What we propose with the state of Jefferson is an Article 4, Section 3 state split in the United States Constitution. It's a fairly simple process, not easy, but simple. And it is, I'm paraphrasing, nor shall any state be formed from the territory within another state or two adjoining states unless the state legislature agrees and Congress agrees. That's the process. The founding fathers put this in the Constitution because they must have recognized the need for this going forward. And in fact, state split has been accomplished at least 4 times in our history. The latest one was Massachusetts from Maine. Oh, I'm sorry, it was West Virginia from Virginia in 1860, Massachusetts from Maine in the 1850 Compromise, and that was a direct Article 4, Section 3 state split. They made 3 attempts at it with the Massachusetts legislature, and finally in the 1850 Compromise, the legislature of Massachusetts agreed to allow Maine to separate, and then Congress agreed as part of the 1850 Compromise. West Virginia from Virginia, Tennessee from Virginia. And so we come to a place now where we have to ask ourselves, is California governable? And I say to you that it's not, and I think the people in this room would agree. And on June 3rd, we'll be able to count 7 counties totaling 350,000 people that agree with that as well. Our economy is in decay. Our children are growing up and leaving because they can't get jobs here. We have mountains of debt. We have problems that weren't here 50 years ago. And there is some causality to that, which I'll get to in a minute. But first of all, the way we got here was lack of representation. We have no representation in the rural state in Sacramento, none whatsoever. Your vote is irrelevant. The people in this audience are irrelevant. My vote's irrelevant. No matter what it is that we want, we have 4 representatives or 5, depending upon how you count northern rural California. And the city of Los Angeles alone has 35 representatives, 35. No matter what it is we want, unless the city of Los Angeles agrees, we're not going to get it. There are literally 3 cities in this state that drive all political agendas in this state, and we are powerless to do anything about that. Even 25 years ago or 30 years ago, we had a rural caucus, and there was some leverage there. Now there is not, because the population in the urban centers has grown so much that they literally have enough representatives to vote down anything and everything we want and need to do. And the result of that is economic devastation in the North State, and I think that's pretty plain for anybody to see. We have no jobs, regulations are killing us, we've been cut out of our resource-based businesses, farming is in danger, logging is gone, mining is gone. Energy production is in doubt because the governor of the state of California refuses to call hydroelectric power renewable energy. If you can believe that, and he has the support of urban legislators. That's just a fact. And these things, by the way, to us, are not partisan issues. We don't fight like that here. We don't say to people, well, you're just a Democrat and that's why you don't agree. It's not our way. We fight about issues, but I find very few times in our discourse throughout the state of Jefferson, the term party never comes into play. Because this is about inclusion and representation for all the people of the North State to do any of the things we want and need to do. Now, what are some of the situations that we find ourselves in? Well, first of all, $420 billion in debt. Now, the state admits to $142 billion, but CaliforniaDebtClock.org and the state controller say it's more like $420 billion. The Los Angeles Times and the state controller, and there was another investigative council, has determined that we're somewhere around $890 billion in unfunded liabilities. And that shows no sign of slowing down. It can't possibly, because the conditions on the ground and the situations in which we find ourselves are ongoing. And they're ongoing in the same way, doing the same thing. We have a $14 billion deficit this year alone. The governor says the budget's balanced, but the state controller does not agree. And the last $4 billion was in 1 month alone. We have laws like CARB. Is anyone here okay with CARB? Are any of the people okay with CARB? I have a $7,000 tractor which I am now a criminal over because I will not put a $20,000 exhaust filter on a $7,000 tractor in a place where our air can set the standards for the nation. It's the cleanest, purest air you've ever seen. The EPA was just caught lying about all of the data regarding particulate emissions and their link to chronic disease or early death. All of it was a fib. And yet CARB is still in process, enacted. Next year, when CARB starts attacking fuel prices, what will these people do here? What will the people in this room do when diesel hits $5 a gallon and when gasoline hits $4.75 a gallon or $5 a gallon? I have an employee at my radio station, and she now buys her gasoline 1 gallon at a time. 1 gallon at a time. When the price hit $4 the other day, she sat in the middle of the floor and cried because now she can't even afford the gallon. And this gal makes enough money to pay her rent. She had a decent life before some of these regulatory processes, the increases in FICA and FUTA and CARB and some of the other things started attacking our ad revenue and her salary directly. And this is all in the name of saving the environment, saving the North State. If they save us any more, we'll all be gone because we'll all be broke. Also, we have the destruction of public domain, public lands. For example, the spotted owl was the end of the logging business in Northern California. Now, why was that? If you go out in the forest, and this is a regulation that most wildland biologists have to adhere to, and you hoot for an owl and you hear the owl, he doesn't have to live there, you don't have to see him. That 500 acres is an activity center and it's off limits to logging because Class A habitat, which was formulated on the Olympic Peninsula in the rainforest, cannot be duplicated in California. Now, if you go down the road and you hear another owl, that 500 is off limits. Well, you don't know, you could be chasing the same owl all day long. But yet those activity centers are off limits to logging. When I drove through the Shasta National Forest and the Klamath National Forest and that green and beautiful place, you know what I saw? I saw a dangerously overstocked forest. I saw a forest with very small trees, much too densely packed. The smaller trees can't get any light, they're dying, and they're leaning over onto the big trees, and that's the ladder fuel that causes a catastrophic wildfire. What is the carbon footprint of a catastrophic wildfire? It's 745 cars running for 1 year per acre burned. So I suggest that's probably not a good policy. We've had catastrophic wildfires in Siskiyou County that burned so hot it melted the topsoil into volcanic glass. And that's because of a failed forest policy. Now, if it worked, it might be another story. But how are the owls doing? Well, according to California Fish and Wildlife, their populations are crashing. In fact, it wasn't the forest at all that's killing them. Now it's another owl, and we're going to start shooting these other owls. But yet we still cannot log because the activity center is still the law. Even though California Resources Board was caught lying about the particulate data, CARB is still the law. So the lie promulgates the regulation. We literally have 800 laws per year that come out of Sacramento. And I can't think of a single one that does anything except make my life more difficult and more expensive than the lives of the people in this room. High-speed rail, Prop 13, the destruction of Prop 13, the potty law. I could go on and on and on, but I think you get the point. So how did we get to this point? And that is Sims versus Reynolds. It's a basket of cases that started in 1964 in the Warren Court. And the Warren Court used a principle that was used an argument very popular in the 60s called the living document principle. The Constitution is a living document. We're modern people. The founders were old people. We know more than they do. We need to alter that document adaptively as we go along to fit the changing times. There are only two problems with that argument. Number one, it's not true. What part of vague is Congress shall make no law? What part of, how vague is shall not be infringed? The Constitution is not a living document because the Constitution was not meant to protect us from changing times. It was meant to protect us from the good intentions of well-meaning tyrants. And that it would do very well, provided we left it alone. So when we look at the California Constitution, it's been amended 521 times in 163 years. 521 times. So what happens in California is the cause du jour changes the Constitution, and whether that's relevant or not, on we go with the regulatory process involved in it. where the federal Constitution has been altered 27 times in 225 years, and 13 of those amendments were on day one, the Bill of Rights. So, and the 3 amendments after that. And even a few of those amendments, people were sorry about afterwards. It's very difficult to amend the United States Constitution. Look at Prohibition. That was really a big deal. That, you know, 3/4 of the states ratified, and within 10 years they thought, gee, this was a mistake. And so they deleted that amendment. But those are the things that keep us safe and keep our liberties safe and protect our ability to make a living, to use property to better the lives of our families. And by the way, all of these things I'm talking about are property rights. Your life is your property. Your property, your ability to make a living on that property, those are things that belong to you, and they should be immutable. How can you conduct your life in the case of a rancher, for example? You're grazing on 10,000 acres, you pay your grazing lease, and all of a sudden someone comes in and says the sage grouse, even though your cattle have been walking around that sage grouse for 100, 150 years, now they're impacting the sage grouse and you need to cut your AUMs in half. How can you conduct your life if you don't know from one day to the next what you own? My water, for example, is adjudicated to my land. However, Fish and Game and North Coast Board, they want the ability to regulate my use of my property. That would be no different than if you have 10 cans of soup in your pantry and someone on Earth Day comes up to you and says, you know, your carbon footprint's too big, you eat too much soup, you need to give me 5 of those cans. Or you'd raise holy hell, you'd never do it, because that's property that you bought and paid for with your sweat and your blood, and you wouldn't give it up. And how could you possibly conduct your life if property was stolen? Property rights are the foundation not only of a rural economy, but of this country, and they must be maintained. So, with Reynolds versus Sims, we start out with Baker versus Carr. That's where the United States Supreme Court gave itself the jurisdiction to involve itself in apportionment in voting districts. And the dissenting justice said that to jump into the thorny thicket involved in these issues is to bury one's head in the sand. And that this will never be a good judgment, and it will cause untold amount of harm. Well, the court thought that after Baker versus Carr was settled, and they gave themselves jurisdiction over voting apportionment cases in the United States, that any state legislature that monkeyed with that would be afraid of a lawsuit, and so there would be no challenges. 30 challenges later, we get to Gray versus Sanders. Gray versus Sanders was the case where the Supreme Court once again gave itself the power to ignore the Constitution, and they said that all elections in state matters will be one person, one vote. And they hung their hat on the 14th Amendment, Section 1. Everyone's entitled to equal protection under the law. Section 1 was good law, because what it did was it guaranteed that no person of one race would be hung for a crime that a person of any other race wouldn't be prosecuted for. So that was good law, but it doesn't mention both. Section 2 mentions votes, but that just guarantees that everyone has the right to vote. It doesn't say that all state elections be predicated on one man, one vote. In fact, Warren not only ignored his own advice later in Brown versus Thompson, but he ignored the Constitution of the United States. Because if one man, one vote were the rule, why does Vermont have 2 senators and Alaska have 2? Why does New York have 2 and Wyoming have 2? Why does the most populous state in the Union have 2 senators and the least populous state have 2? Why do we have the Electoral College if one man, one vote is the constitutional precedent? In fact, that precedent isn't found in English common law, it wasn't found in colonial law, and it's certainly not found in United States law until 1964. Now, when Warren hung his hat on the 14th Amendment, he did something that was very interesting, because there were states that had state senators by county both before and after the 14th Amendment, California among them. In 1926, California had 1 state senator for each county, except counties that were less than 3,000 people, and I believe there were, Sierra County and Plumas were lumped together. But we had representation by area before, from 1926 until 1964. California didn't ratify the 14th Amendment until 1959. So if that logic was true, why were states, including a lot of states back in the 1800s, allowed to have representation by county both before the 14th Amendment and after it? Well, I think Warren was trying to accomplish something. And in fact, when someone asked him what was his greatest achievement, he did not say school desegregation. He did not say civil rights. He said, I forced 30 state legislatures to change the way they elect representatives. That was his proudest accomplishment. And the court under Article 3 does not have that power. So here we are today. In 1964, California had about $5 billion in long-term debt. In fact, from 1950 to 1964, it was right around $5 billion. It went up a little bit, down a little bit, but California worked. Because as Warren said, votes don't represent rocks and trees. And he was right, they don't. But votes do represent communities. They represent unique geographical needs. The county of Butte has different needs than the county of Siskiyou. The county of Siskiyou has different needs than Del Norte County. And all of us in rural Northern California have vastly different needs than the county of Los Angeles or Sacramento or San Francisco or San Jose. And we need representation by county so that we can express those wishes, and also there is a check on power. Now, assemblies in every state are simply rubber stamps for their state senates because they're all elected by the same people along the same, roughly the same apportionment lines. We have one state assembly person for every 450,000 people in California. We have one state senator for every 950,000 people. We're number 50 out of 50 in representation. The next worst state only has 130,000 people per state representative. The best state has 3,000. The difference is political campaigns and special interest. In New Hampshire, it costs $1,000 for a political campaign. You pay your filing fee, you fill your car with gas, and you go knock on 3,000 doors. And their turnover is tremendous because when they don't do a good job, you're seeing them in Walmart. And you get back for the poor thing that they did, and then you unelect him and elect his neighbor because you can do it, and it's cheap enough, and he has to look you in the eye. I am a pilot. I served in one war in the United States Army, and I have flown airplanes in 6 wars as a civilian contractor for the United States government. And I am here to tell you, I have been to every hole on earth. Every socialist hole, every revolutionary hole, every place the United States has ever had a soldier. Pretty much since 1980, I've been in 1971 in Vietnam. And what I found in my travels, when you go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, their lives don't work. And they don't work because they have no one that represents them. Here in the United States, people's lives work when they have close representation. It has nothing to do with party, it has nothing to do with agenda. It has to do with the ability of the people to communicate adequately with representation. So once we got past Reynolds versus Sims, the court then ignored its own advice in Brown versus Thompson later, where it said Niobrara County in Wyoming, with only 3,000 people, deserved a state representative because every place deserves representation. And then again in Sawyer versus Tulare Water, the court said that votes can represent rocks and trees, provided it's not done prejudicially and the greater political interest is served. So part of the reason for this declaration, and the declaration is very carefully worded, it's a declaration and petition to withdraw. What it creates for the county of Butte and all the other counties that have affirmed so far and will affirm is standing in any challenge that comes to voter apportionment and dilution of the vote. If the Board of Supervisors affirms this declaration, you will have standing in a federal challenge of the Reynolds versus Sims cases so that we can create our own state and have representation by county. Also, this is a two-pronged attack. The other attack is, because let's face it, we're not children, we're going to get 10 or 15 of these declarations, we're going to go to the State House, and there's a chance that it will be ignored, that it'll be rejected out of committee or in some other way. So if that occurs, we'll mount 2 federal lawsuits because we have standing, we've been harmed, we've asked for something and we were ignored. Now, whenever we have standing and whenever there's a harm, there must also be a remedy or the court will dismiss the case. Well, what's the remedy for lack of representation? More representation. Everybody wins in this. And we have several methods of attack planned to do it. The first is with the declaration. If California allows us to separate peacefully, we form a state that represents the people in it, represents their history, their moral integrity, their cultural and economic values, and gives representation to each county with a state senator in a part-time legislature. And we're not going to need 571 state agencies, I don't think. So if you have representation on the state level, then you will be able to express the needs of Butte County. And that's the most important part of this. The state of Jefferson will not. Yes.
We're at 20 minutes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, let me close this up. There were some guys in Woodrow Wilson's administration, Bernays and Creasy, I think his name was, and they were sent out to convince the American public to join World War I. Well, Bernays, he hated the term propaganda. He thought it sounded bad. So he created the term public relations in order to get past that. And they then stumped the country in order to change people's minds to enter World War I, and they were obviously successful at that. So we're mounting a public relations campaign, and what we would like to do is we would like to help people understand how this would be a win-win for California. Southern California would be able to keep the money, they would be able to address problems that we can't even understand. We would be free to create a constitutional state that represents the people, their needs, their interests, their moral and historical imperatives. The difference between constitutional republic and tyranny is simple. And I've been to all these countries. I've been to Bulgaria, Romania, CAR, DAR, all of them. Under a constitutional republic, you wake up in the morning and you know that the law is there to protect everyone equally. It protects your ability to use the assets you went out and earned to make a living for yourself and your family. Under a tyrannical form of government, you wake up in the morning and you say, what is the government going to do to me today? And what I'd like to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, is what kind of government would you like for Butte County? Thank you.
Comments by folks up and down the state. Something like this is never going to happen. It's too hard. How would you address that?
Well, in a couple of ways. Christmas Eve, 1775, George Washington was in his office and he was writing something on little scraps of paper and he was tearing them off and they were falling on the floor. And Benjamin Rush walked in the room and he picked one of those pieces of paper up and he read it and it said, "Liberty or death." That was the password for the attack on Trenton on the next day. Those guys walked 20 miles with no shoes, crossed an icy river, marched 20 more miles, fought, and marched again and fought again. Jimmy Doolittle on the deck of the Hornet with 80 20-year-olds about to go to Tokyo, knowing that they didn't have enough gas to get back. And they went anyway. I'm really glad that Jimmy and George didn't say, you know what, too tough for me, let's go have a sandwich.
We need to get moving on our agenda, so.
We used to be known as a tough people. We are tough. We can do this, and we can do 100 times more if we put our minds to it. We are the people.
Thank you. And I have one other question. It's also been asked a number of times, how can we possibly survive without the state social service welfare money that we would lose as a 50%?
That's an excellent question. There are two avenues that come to mind as a response to that. First of all, California has $1.1 trillion in debt. It is not a question of whether Jefferson can survive, because the LAO says if we separate now, we'll only be responsible for 3% of the debt that California admits to, which is $140 billion, manageable. If we wait 10 years, we won't be able to separate because we can never manage 3% of $10 trillion. The question isn't whether Jefferson can survive, it's can we get away from California before the ship goes down to all hands. That economic engine has been on the same track for 50 years, and it's a failure. And it's getting worse by the day. The other answer is PILT. How long has it been since Fish and Game paid their PILT in Butte County? Well, in the state of Jefferson, those lands would be placed back in beneficial use and back on property tax rolls. How long has it been since the feds paid their PILT because of logging and so on and so forth? In the state of Jefferson, with the enabling acts and some of the precedents of the state of Alaska, the precedent that Utah is trying to set, there is a real case for regaining control of federal lands within the county of Butte and the state of Jefferson and putting those lands back in beneficial use and restoring PILT payments to counties through direct timber receipts or mining receipts, so on and so forth. There are 4 businesses on earth from which all products stem: mining, timber, farming, ranching, and energy production. We've been regulated out of 3 of them. Our economy is not suffering because we can't produce things. Our economy is suffering because we're not allowed to produce things. Every week I have people call me and say, if you get this done, I'm moving my business to Jefferson. If you get this done, I'm moving my family to Jefferson. We lost 31,000 jobs last month. The state of Texas gained 30,000. We can set up a constitutional framework that has a regulatory and business environment that will encourage enterprise in the state of Jefferson, and that's how we'll make it without the welfare fund.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Baird, since you're the authority, it looks like, and they like to clap for you, so may, yeah, it's right. We do with this with marijuana stuff all the time too. Not to use marijuana, they just like to clap. The question I have on the public lands deal and some of these other things in our new state here, Jefferson, being a rancher myself, and I understand this frustration, and I've been dealing with a lot of other stuff with this too on a national level. How do you feel the state, by pointing out the state of California, we gained, this is all these regulations you talk about, mostly all federal. Well, they're not going away.
That's a great question, because the 10th Amendment is our process to stop that. Literally, if we had a state government that had the backbone to hold the feds to the letter of the 10th Amendment, and we've done this in Siskiyou County a couple of times when U.S. Fish and Wildlife came over the Coho thing. We said, well, who's your data quality assessment officer? And they looked at each other and said, what's that? We said, well, the Regulatory Flexibility Act, the Data Quality Act, demands that your science have integrity and that you have a data quality assessment officer and you be able to prove to the people that the economic impacts of whatever program you propose won't be severe. They went away, and it's been 2 years. Now they'll be back, but because we don't have a state constitution that will help us defend our counties. The state of Jefferson that we imagine, the county will have the lion's share of the power. You will be the ones to make decision because these people here put you in those chairs, and if they don't like what you did, they're going to corner you in Walmart and give it to you. And sometimes they'll be right, and sometimes they won't.
I will go to Walmart.
Everything always happens in Walmart. But anyway, so if you have a state constitutional framework that will protect the county and defend against the federal government using the 10th Amendment, the counties will be free to conduct their business as they see fit and as the people direct their elected representatives. We don't have that now. California allows the federal government to break the law pretty much anytime they want to.
So it sounds like to me that in the first, say, 20 to 50 years of this new state, a lot of court cases, a lot of suing, a lot of, I mean, well, with our money, right?
Well,
I mean, how are we going to fund that?
Well, first of all, the state of West Virginia argued about Civil War debt for 150 years. They just settled that like 3 weeks ago.
So, I've been to West Virginia, so I'm not that excited about this.
Yeah, right. Well, I may have changed the boundary line on that one myself. But the point is, there wouldn't be thousands and thousands of court cases because Congress appoints committees of separation, and so we would have committees of separation that would work out all the mundane details, who gets this, who gets that, who gets the Caltrans bulldozer. So a lot of those things would not need to be adjudicated. They would be agreed to in advance. And the LAO, the state LAO, says that it would be reasonable and rational for assets of the former California that lie within the new state to be part of that new state, because after all, we were taxpayers when those things were built ourselves. Now, as far as the debt goes, look, even though we don't have representation, we weren't asleep when the money was spent. It is the honorable thing to do to assume our portion of that debt. Once again, the state admits to $140 billion. According to the state's attorney general, we would only be responsible for 3% of that. That's a manageable figure even for a small rural state with 1 million people. We wouldn't be the smallest state, or at least populous, and our economy on the first day would be about the size of the state of New Mexico, and only up from there because we have a constitutional framework that encourages business and enterprises. And we have all the resources in the world used responsibly with which to fund future programs.
I'm just trying to, this business-wise,
Yeah.
tax-wise, how do you pay, it's going to be, retail people are going to be in the South, right? So sales tax dollars are going to be smaller, I would think, because there's less of us. So if we come back to like Oregon does on property, I mean,
Well,
how are we going to fund all this?
Well, first of all, I would favor a Prop 13 type of fare. That's absolutely true. And when you embrace conservative fiscal values, then you see that with increase in business activity, you generate more revenue. More revenue puts more money in people's pocket. People who have money buy property. That property increases in value, and property tax rates go up. I would see that if we had a slightly lower sales tax rate than Lower California, you'd see a traffic jam from people coming into Butte County to buy things in Butte County stores, and that puts money in people's pockets, and that raises the value of everything they own, and then there's more tax revenue generated. Those are the types of things. Also, the PILT money, restoring lumber mining, all of that activity. In addition to that, we suggested to Tehama County, since there's a tremendous amount of water that passes through their county and they don't get any benefit from that water, that they place a water conveyance fees on the Southern California water exporters and make 50 bucks an acre foot doing that. There are a great many ways that we can fund the new state, and I could go on with that for hours. But what we also need, we need people such as yourself to give us workable ideas so that this will work for everyone. And those ideas are here. We're not stupid people. There's a ton of talent in this room.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
My concern, we talk about it as we go on. I'm just concerned as more people come into the state of Jefferson, our roads aren't very big, right?
Well,
We're small towns, our infrastructure, we have to fund all that.
If you have a free state, people are going to want to come here.
Sure.
To manage growth is going to be a problem, but once again, how can you say I've got mine, but I don't want anybody else to have theirs?
Well, that happens every day.
It does.
That's what it is every day here.
Yeah, it does. But I think we don't lack the intelligence to manage that problem correctly.
What happens when, I'm sorry, I'm taking all this time up, I'm just kind of curious because this intrigues me. You know, anyways, what happens when, because I grew up in an area that was a beautiful place to live, like Northern California, very close to San Francisco. They all showed up there. We had this beautiful ag town, and now it's full of people that don't think like I do. Because they can afford to live there. They can afford to buy ground there. They can afford not to buy 1,000 acres, plop a house down there, kick everybody off of it, and just let it go. And then how do you stop that? I mean, we can't take our ball and go home, so how do we deal with that?
You can't stop it now. It's happening now. What's happening now is that the rural areas of Northern California are being
So
rapidly
then why put a new state in? That's what I'm saying. What are we going to gain by our new state?
What we're going to gain is liberty, first of all. What we're going to gain is an economic environment where, I mean, my child left because there's no job he can get here that'll pay his pay. We gain representation. We gain the ability to have some direction over the tax money that's taken from us every day. We gain control of the debt that's mounting with reckless abandon. We have to gain control of these things because any other plan doesn't address any of those issues. And quite frankly, as I squint and look forward, as California piles up 1 trillion, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, 4 trillion, the train is going to crash. The boat is going to go down. I mean, that's inevitable. The Confederates learned in 1863, you can't print your way out of trouble. You can't spend your way out of debt. Those are the things we can gain, and hopefully along the way, with that constitutional structure, we can create a place that's a good place to live for our children and our grandchildren, where it serves our interest and our morals.
Thank you.
No worries.
I got one question for you. The past efforts to split the state, one was more successful than all the rest. Have you thought about why that one at least got to the assembly?
Yeah, because everybody wants it. I mean, in 1992, 27 out of 31 counties voted overwhelmingly to leave the state of California. The only reason that one didn't get through the Senate is, as I understand it, there were some personal headbutting issues between Stan Statham and the President Pro Tem at the time, and he would not allow it to leave committee. Now, if that happens to us, then we have standing, we have harm, and we have remedy for a federal challenge. And our implied threat is if you allow us to separate peacefully, you can keep doing things the way you always have. And if you don't, we'll pull the rug out from under California politics forever and reinstitute the federal model of government in California. And with 40 rural senators, we could vote ourselves out.
Thank you.
Okay.
everyone, it's just going to drag on and someone's not going to get to speak because we have other timed items. And we'll just get right to the public participation. This is only an informational item. The board's not going to take action. And the other thing we're going to do is a minute and a half for each speaker. I'm going to call the cards first, and then if anyone else would like to speak.
Mining, air quality rules. I've always been in the construction industry, and believe it or not, they just now said all of California is 110 mile an hour minimum wind building standard, which is surprising. So I believe that this is a great debate, and I believe that if there was support, we should pass on it. If there's not, at least I'll vote for it.
Yeah, I feel much the same way as Bill does. And a lot of things throughout history have been deemed too hard to do, but have succeeded anyway. And a number of examples were given today. And one is the race to the moon that President Kennedy prescribed back in the early 60s. Why did he want to do that? It's hard. It's easy. Right. So there are a lot of things that are hard, and there are a lot of things wrong with California today. There are a lot of things good with California today. But I think the opportunity to put ourselves in a position where we can support the state of Jefferson would be appropriate. And with that, I would ask the board to agendize for May a discussion and consideration of a board vote on the declaration of support for the state of Jefferson. Or, second choice would be to place the choice before the voters in November election.
Well, I just gotta say, I didn't ever hear once today that one of us said it was going to be hard. I mean, our board, I don't know where that came from today. I heard that a lot from you folks saying, oh, we don't want to do it because it's hard. It's hard. Well, I get up every day, go to work, that's hard. I get that. I never heard that today. That was kind of the tone you guys kept saying today. And I want to make sure that you understand where I come from. I'm not worried about being hard. That doesn't scare me at all. My problem is I've been successful in this state. I've worked, I started just like everybody else, right out of college, went to work, put some businesses up, bought some ground. Yes, I was fortunate to have a family that understood how to do that and raised me that way. I was blessed to have children that helped me along the way. I've made a living, a very good living in this state, even with all the regulations. And I understand that, and I played sports growing up all the way through school, and there were some rules I thought were stupid. I thought I should be able to do everybody that face masks if I wanted to. They said, no, you can't do that. Okay, I didn't just say quit playing football at that point. I didn't take my ball home. I learned how to play within those rules. Now, I agree with you 100%. I think that the federal government is out of control. I believe that it's killing our nation, but what they don't know. Supervisor Teeter and I were back in D.C. a couple weeks ago talking with the Forest Service. Half those guys never even been out here. They don't even know. I run in Modoc County, I run in Plumas County, so I don't understand the rural countries. The ranch right next to me in Modoc County, Forest Service owns, there's trees stacked up to the fence line. All I'm waiting for now is to burn through there into my places. And a year like this, it definitely will probably happen. I've talked to them about that. People don't understand it. I get where you're all coming from. Believe me, I understand the frustration. What I need to know is, for me, is how. I need to know how. I'm not afraid of jumping on board. I love the Republic idea, and I understand we have cases that said it took it away in '64. I think a senator per county is awesome. I jump on board with that kind of a fight, in all honesty. But here's the deal. I think that, when one of the gals, I can't remember which one it was, said that we're a small group that's loud, and it runs. The environmentalists are a small group and loud, and they've controlled our country for years. I think it's time for us to take it back also on that side of it. I'm not afraid of the fear. I mean, I get that. I was taking little notes as I went along today, and I think for me, in order for me to get on board with this, is I gotta know how it's all gonna end up. Because I guarantee you, every one of us will disagree on something in this room. Every one of us. And so we start organizing our state up here, and all of a sudden, well, wait a minute. I don't think you should have the right to do this. Or I like this. We're gonna have this problem. And I'm looking at 20 years, 150 years, trying to figure out how to sue the federal government to get our rights, even though we're in this puny little state at this point. And I mean, like I said, I'm in the livestock business. I sit on national boards. I go to these puny little states. They have the same problem. There's a big city in every one of those states that runs it. In Illinois, Chicago runs it. Oregon, Salem, and Portland run it. everywhere we go, it's gonna be like, and I guarantee you, Chico's gonna run it next time in the city of Jefferson. You're not gonna like that either. We don't like it, right? Not to get for Chico, sorry. But I'm just saying, South Carolina County, there's always gonna be that. I represent the good part of Chico, right? No, all of it. No, I'm just saying there's always gonna be somebody that doesn't think the way we think. And I think we've got to work together, and we've got to get things on track, but taking our ball and going home is not the best way to go. And you got to show me how I'm not going to be paying more taxes on crappy little roads trying to figure out how to get my product out. All you from MoDOT know how hard it is to get cattle from here to there. You start stacking more people that are coming to this great business. How many more trucks am I going to have to get behind and get to go up 299 or coming around, or my place in Plumas, the same thing. So Sonoma County was the same way. It was a great rural community, wonderful. People found how wonderful it was there. You can't drive around that dang place anymore. Our ranch down there, you can't get from one side of the town to the other without 40 minutes worth of traffic. And a whole different mindset. So we live in a beautiful part of the state. If you think people aren't going to figure that out, we're going to have these same problems. So you got to show me, for me to get on board with this, how it's going to be funded and how it's structured going to be different than we are now. Because you still have a federal government we still have to answer to. So that's just me. I mean, that's...
Is that a second?
No. You'll get one. That's me.
So Bill seconded.
Yeah, I'd like to bring it back.
Sir.
There is no public comment at this time. Thank you. Unless do you want to hear what he has to say?
I'm trying to hear your question.
Are you with us or against us?
Uh-oh. It's not that easy.
I think you're on the side.
Yeah, well, I'll have no, I'm not a politician. I'm like the propaganda and the public service guy, I'm a public servant. This is not my career by any means. So, it's not a black or white situation. I know you might think it is, but it's not a black and white situation for me.
Okay, we got a motion, a second.
Can we do that?
So I
Ask to
have-
bring it back?
I have a question. So, public comment, would it be just be the board deliberating, or would you?
Oh, yeah, we do.
You did.
You can direct staff.
If we just, so Larry and I would like to direct staff to bring it back and agendize. That's the motion, right, Larry?
Yeah, whatever it takes.
Yeah. I think just if 3 want it back, that's good.
Call the question.
Call the question. Aye.
Aye.
Against?
Pick your 3 eyes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter.
Al, yes.
So, what's the vote?
Bring it back.
You are a politician.
Who voted for what? I need to document it. I'm abstaining.
Roll call. I voted for my motion.
I may have voted for my second, but now I'm confused, so.
So I don't mind bringing it back.
Actually, I don't want to
Second
bring
meeting in
it
May,
back.
sound good? Second meeting in May, sound good?
Good. Right. So, actually, I think June would be better.
Why?
November election.
The November election, you have time.
So,
I need to clarify, Supervisor First Voter, you abstaining? I'll vote for it. Actually, I would, if we're not going to have a public comment, I would really like to.
No, you don't have public comment.
We're doing this all together.
have public comment again.
You have to. Oh, we didn't post it.
Yeah,
No, yeah, this is just discussion today. This wasn't a whole deal.
information, the next meeting that we have.
What's the calendar like?
June is, we can put it on the calendar.
First meeting in June or second meeting? First meeting?
Still like to see May. Second meeting in May.
You got it.
Second meeting in June.
we have our budget coming up. I just don't want to, I want to give everyone a fair opportunity. People are going to come back. It could be for and against. We could be here for a very long time. I just think, let's get through our budget
And get
first.
some of your questions answered,
I
if
would
you'd
like-
like, from us. We're more than happy to do that. I don't mean to speak out, but we're more than happy to answer your questions. If you want to call us, we'll give you your number. We have answers for you, Mr. Lambert. Good questions, good concerns, and we're more than happy to answer that. And as Yuba City did, or Yuba County did, They waited about 4 weeks so they could weigh a lot of different things and did their own study, and we all know what conclusion they came to.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so,
All right,
so the first, yeah, Mr. Chair. I'd like to see it in June,
June, thank you.
first meeting in June.
All right. Is that clear?
I need to clarify what the vote on the current motion.
It was 4-1, I think.
I'll change it again.
Thank you.
With Supervisor Lambert voting no.
4-1. 4-1.
And that was just to agendize it for the June, first meeting in June agenda.
Yes, we're going to take a 10-minute break.